Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you being here. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourself and you're wearing a mask if you're outside and that you're socially distancing. This is, again, things are good but stressful in these times for me right now. So I'm glad that I have that I can put something out into the universe and see that people are responding to it, which is a really excellent thing that I don't think I will ever take for granted. So thank you guys for being here. On the show today is a gentleman by the name of Mike Rocco. Mike Rocco, his work holds a particularly sentimental place in my heart. Mike was the frontman for a rock band in the Baltimore area called Cinder Road. They were also previously known as Plunge. And the first time I ever saw a concert at the Record Theater, which was a amazing live concert venue in Towson, Maryland, near where I went to college. It was actually walking distance from my dorm, freshman and sophomore year. And the first, I believe the first show I ever saw at the Record, and we discussed this a little bit in the episode, was Laughing Colors, Plunge, and Shinedown. I think that was the first concert I ever went to in Towson. And Mike also was a bass player in SR-71 for their album Here We Go Again, which was initially only released in Japan, but is now available widely and has some of my favorite SR-71 songs on it. This conversation was a long time coming. I reached out to Mike, and we had a pretty frank discussion about the music business and his experience in the music business, both with Cinder Road and with SR-71, as well as his experiences playing around the world, because Cinder Road, they played with the stories he was telling me. The stories he told me of playing gigs, opening for Kiss, opening for Daughtry right after American Idol, are fascinating kind of stuff. And then also there's a lot of discussion about musicianship, and a lot of this. I'll be honest. I don't know if I asked all of the right questions during this interview, but there is a lot, I think, to take from this, and especially as far as Mike's experience with the music industry and where his career went and where it is now. But this was a great conversation. There's some great stories here, and I know there are more, so I'm hoping to hear some more of them eventually. So thank you guys for being here, and I'll talk to you after the interview. So let's get into my interview with the former bass player for SR-71, the former frontman for Cinder Road, Mike Rocco. And we're good to go. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, because I'm sure I mentioned earlier, but you're part of my rock and roll education as far as live music goes when it comes to the Baltimore
awesome.
music scene.
I love that.
Yeah. I'm trying to. I was searching my memory before we got on the phone here. Is it possible that I saw you and Laughing Colors with Shinedown in like 2004 when you were still Plunge?
It's possible. I don't remember off the top of my head. I know we've definitely played with Laughing Colors a number of times, and I can't remember if we opened for Shinedown or not. You know where it would have been?
I think it was the Record Theater. The late great Record Theater.
Yeah, yes, that place was the best.
Yeah, I saw so many incredible shows there. When I got to I played there once, and I felt like a rock star.
I think that's how we all felt when we were there. It was one of those hometown venues that became really like the place where you saw bands rise and see some success. And God, I remember how we would we'd start on the Sunday nights, the Sunday night all ages shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget what they used to call them. They had like a name for it. Maybe it was the noise in the basement thing or something like that. But every band would have to sell tickets and whatnot.
Yeah.
And man, we tried so hard. Everybody just busted their ass to sell tickets. And I remember, being on that stage and thinking, God, this is so cool. It was a real stage with a real PA system and lights. And when the place was crowded, I mean, there was nothing better. I mean, it was like being in your backyard and playing this awesome concert venue. And it had a cool vibe because of the fact that it used to be a movie theater. And I just loved it. I'll never forget, as long as I live, the first time we sold that place out. It was like still one of my favorite, moments in my music career.
Oh, that's awesome. Was that as Cinder Road or as Plunge?
That was Plunge.
That's awesome. Yeah, because that place, I think, was like, it was like the place you wanted to play. Like, I would compare it to like the Metro in Chicago. It was like it was like the killer venue. Like, the setups were amazing, and yeah, just like you were saying, it could be like your first live gig, and you'd feel like a complete pro being on that stage. Yeah, I remember.
Well, I think every. Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead. I was just gonna say I remember.
I feel like every city has this, handful of cool, not historic but established venues. For New York, I mean, God, there's so many, but like CBGB or Irving Plaza, and
mm-hmm.
there's tons and tons of them. The Whiskey, the Roxy, the Viper Room in LA, any of the House of Blues venues. And for Baltimore, it was Fletcher's or the 8x10 on the smaller end
mm-hmm.
for the Auto Bar, and then Record Theater was that 750 cap venue that, man, when you could headline a show there, you felt like you were doing something right, and then it bumped up to Ram's Head and, kind of went on from there.
Oh yeah. And especially I imagine maybe for you, who's someone who's like born and raised in the Baltimore area, to start your band in that town, and then to like remembering doing those all ages shows when you're just like I imagine driving around or hustling, trying to get people interested in wanting to come see you play, to sell that out. That's like the stuff of like Motley Crue's Behind the Music, like when they sold out the Whiskey.
I hadn't thought about it like that. We sold that out in high school. We were in high school when that happened. And, but we hustled, man. We hustled, really hard. And I remember, literally and we idolized Motley Crue, but I remember printing up, tons and tons of flyers for the shows at Kinko's and plastering them all over telephone poles around Towson and at the university. I remember, kind of hounding all the people I knew in high school and the other guys in the band doing the same thing. And the reality is, once you hit enough critical mass of people that are going, then it becomes the thing to do that night. And even people that are not even into the band, they know that everybody else they know is going, and it becomes the place to go. And that was that particular night. That's what happened, and it felt really good. And even as we evolved, I mean, obviously through SR-71 and then eventually Cinder Road, we did a lot of touring, and it was just so awesome for me to come home after a long tour and play a show. I mean, the Christmas show on December 23rd that we did for probably 12 or 15 years, every December 23rd was our, generally our final show of the year. We'd been traveling all over the country or the world, and that was the last gig before we closed down for the year. And then it would be Christmas and New Year's, and then we kick it back up again the next year and go back on the road. And I just remembered people being home from college and being back, local from living out of town. It was just such an awesome time for us to get to see people we hadn't seen in a long time, play a show, end the year on a positive note, and then, enjoy the holidays and start over, after the first.
That's amazing. This is the kind of stuff that I was like dreaming to be a part of because I grew up in Calvert County, which is about maybe an hour south of Baltimore. And to me,
Mhm.
Towson was like a big city. Like when I first got there, it was like, oh my gosh,
Right.
Chinese will deliver to my dorm, and I can walk to Barnes and Noble and this amazing venue. I'm going to be here every night. Um,
Yeah.
and this is when you were in high school. So plunge starts in when you're in high school. So what year is this?
Middle school. I started plunge in 1995. It was the summer after sixth grade.
That's awesome. I love that this goes this far back. Um, I'm definitely going to want to talk a lot about like your career of plunge and Cinder Road as well. But I will also let you know because you did play you played in bass in SR-71 towards for a while, yeah.
Yes.
They were like maybe after Blink 182 my second favorite band of all time. So the fact that I have this connection to seeing you play in Cinder Road and Plunge, and then also seeing you play with SR-71, I have a lot to I'll want to ask about. I'm so curious
Sure.
about like what the Baltimore music scene was like at this time in like the late 90s or late 90s early 2000s, because I know, like, I guess I learned that Baltimore has this like this like what I'll call like the rock and roll scene with like 98 Rock and Rams Head Live and all of these other bands. I'm curious, like, who,
Mhm.
like, I imagine you were going to shows. Like, who were you going and seeing during this time?
Well, I'll answer that by backing up for a second. I think that Baltimore had an amazing live music scene for decades. And my band and my bands and a handful of others around the same time where we kind of peaked, that was really, by and large, I think, the end for the most part of the music scene from a live original music standpoint. Um, that was kind of the end of it. I mean, there haven't been many bands that quote unquote got out, got signed and got out of town since. I mean, there's been some exceptions, but when I was coming up in the scene in the late 90s and early 2000s, um, there was a lot of bands that were making noise locally and regionally, and there was always whispers of this, that, and the other band they were showcasing in New York, or there was a record rep coming to see them, or they were going to get signed, or they're talking with such and such label. I mean, it was, Laughing Colors, Kelly Bell Band, Crushing Day, Voodoo Blue, Us, All Time Low,
Oh yeah.
um, Jimmy's Chicken Shack, Good Charlotte,
Hmm.
SR-71, and it was, we all knew each other. We all played the same venues. We all played shows together.
Hmm.
And, I think there was a healthy competition. Um, and some of us were lucky enough to get signed to major label deals. Others were not. But, look, there wasn't a venue in this state that we didn't play at some point in time. And there was a lot of venues that had live music. It was a great time to be a musician. I mean, from the time I was 15 on, it was the only job I'd ever had,
Wow.
um, up until I was 29.
That's
So, I mean, it's because you could make a living playing music, and do it today, unless you're in a cover band, a wedding band, or kind of one of those solo or duo acoustic acts.
yeah, like yeah, exactly. Like those are like the jobs for playing live, unless you've got like buzz and people. I would imagine unless you've got like people who like you on the internet, because that's where the most of where I find new stuff that I like now is through like
Right.
YouTube or what have you. Um, yeah, but yeah, and I really do remember this time. Like I remember going and like like, I would like Shinedown would come when Shinedown would come through. I would I would see them, and they would have like Silvertide Wars opening, and then when Silvertide would come back and headline on a
Yeah.
Wednesday, I'll go see them
Yep.
headline.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I was a big Silvertide fan too, and I was at least one of the shows at the Wrecker when they played, um, and I remember there was hardly anybody there, and I remember thinking to myself, man, this band is good. They're going to do something big, and they had a run. I mean, they had a run similar to we had.
mhm.
They got signed, they put out a record, they made a little noise, they were on some big tours, and then time kind of marched on.
Yeah, the nature of this of the business side of this is brutal to me at times, because I remember like I remember seeing so many bands, and of course I remember seeing All Time Low. I think when they were opening up for SR-71, I saw them play. I'm very glad and fortunate for their success, but Baltimore had so many great bands that I don't know if that was just the way the industry was at the time, but I feel like Baltimore should have a more national reputation for producing great music. So
We were getting there. We were getting close. We had a moment. I mean, between Jimmy's Chicken Shack, SR-71, and Good Charlotte, I think that, that 99 to 2002, there was a lot of people like, right, who's the next coming out of here? And that's when we got signed. We were signed in 2002 to EMI,
mhm.
or was that Columbia? We were signed a couple of times. I think that's when we signed to Columbia Records. Yeah, we signed to Columbia Records in 2002.
Mhm.
And I thought we're the next one. And that record deal didn't work out. I mean, look, it comes down to so many factors that are completely out of your control.
Uh-huh.
It's not about being a great band or a great singer or writing great songs, as much as people like to say that. Absolutely, those things have a factor, but it's about luck and timing,
Mhm.
almost more than the other things that I just mentioned. Because, you have to be in the right place at the right time and connect with an audience, and knowing what I know now about the music business, it's not a fair fight, and you either get lucky or get the push from the label that gets you over the hump, or you connect with some of these grassroots fan bases, and they support you forever. And we were not lucky enough to do that internationally. We've got hot spots that it worked, but our type of music was the kind that doesn't have a scene. There is no rock scene. The Warped Tour created a scene for bands like that, the jam bands and the kind of Fish, Grateful Dead, jammy kind of things of the world, that has a scene.
Mhm.
But just rock, like we played, doesn't, and you can see that evidenced by these tours. So when you've mentioned Shinedown a couple of times, there's been times, and I'll use, my friends in Daughtry.
Mhm.
When we first played near Baltimore, and on the first Daughtry tour, we did the 930 Club, was the closest place we played. The next time they came back through the area with Lifehouse opening, they played at the Baltimore Arena. And then when they came back through after that, they played at the Lyric. Or the Hippodrome, I'm sorry, at the Hippodrome. So, when their hits were all over the radio and they had the buzz, they were at the arena. When it cooled off a little bit and they weren't quite the flavor of the week, they played it, at the Hippodrome. And look, it's kind of out of anybody's control, and the same has been said for many, many other bands in the rock scene. When you're hot, you're playing the big venue, everybody's there. And when things cool off, it kind of shrinks down. But there are other bands that, are kind of able to ride that wave, and they hit a little bit of a glass ceiling, but they're able to maintain some consistency.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of what you're describing to me is analogous to my experiences in the comedy scene, because I've seen, you'll see somebody have like a a really hot year, and they'll headline a bunch of big rooms, and then a couple years later, it could be back in the clubs, or like doing like one night spots and things of that nature. Like, yeah, it's so like bizarrely fluid. So I wanted.
Well, Pauly Shore was at the Magooby's Joke House in Timonium. I mean, this dude was a huge celebrity in the 80s and 90s. Movie star.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great analogy. It's no different than music.
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to ask you, because I am curious about your experience with EMI, but even going back before that. So Plunge starts when like you're in your teens. So when did you play guitar and bass first? When did that start for you? What sparked your interest in playing?
I started playing when I was 12. I got a guitar. I bought a guitar with the money I got from my 12th birthday. I bought it at Bill's Music in Catonsville.
Mm-hmm.
It was a black Ibanez guitar. I still have it.
Nice.
And I had listened to music my whole life. Music was always around the house. My dad was a singer and sang professionally, kind of regionally, up until my mom got pregnant with me. And then, he kind of transitioned into another career. It's funny how cyclical life is, because the same thing happened to me, 30 years later. But I started playing guitar, and basically a few other buddies that I was friends with in middle school also loved music. And look, I just felt like when I listened to music, it did something to me. I connected with the songs and the lyrics and the melody so deeply. Like, I felt every word. I was part of the story. It's like they were reading my mind, depending on the song. And I thought, God, if I feel this way about the music I'm listening to, it must feel a lot better when it's you that are telling the story. And that's true. It's very powerful. At least it was for me. It felt really good, therapeutic and emotional, and it was awesome.
That absolutely. Can you tell me one of those songs that felt like it was reading your mind? That's a really powerful analogy. It makes total sense to me.
Anything on the Def Leppard Hysteria album, or so I'm a huge 80s hair band fan.
Mm-hmm.
Huge. I mean, that's my favorite music. And when I really got into music was the late 80s, early 90s. And at that point, these bands were starting to put out greatest hits,
Yeah.
because they came out in the early 80s and whatnot. So I bought all these greatest hits. Motley Crue was Decade of Decadence, and you name it, and the other bands, and Rat, was another one. Mm-hmm. I just fell in love with their songs, and I loved the guitars, the riffs, the musicianship. I loved the solos. It's everything about it. They and a lot of people made fun of it from a stylistic standpoint, the hair and the clothes and the makeup, but these were world-class musicians, most of these guys.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
they were just unbelievable players.
Oh, yeah.
Bands today can't hold a candle.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
Musicianship went out the window a long time ago. It went out the window a long time ago. Like, you don't even have to play an instrument to be a successful, quote unquote, musician today, because DJs have taken that role. Like, if you weren't good at guitar or bass or drums or singing, you were not in a good band, and your band didn't make it anywhere, because nobody liked it, and eventually your parents and your girlfriend don't want to go to the shows, So the whole thing, that's why you practice. That's why you try to get better. That's why you take lessons. And I think that's gone out the window. I lived in my bedroom playing guitar for years and years and years. I took vocal and guitar lessons for years and years and years, and bass lessons. I took all these lessons even when I was touring. I'd come back and take lessons because you can always be better. And I think society in general has lost that. Everybody wants to be given everything, and mediocrity is the new norm.
As far as pop music goes, I absolutely agree with you 100%. Because if you listen to like a band like White Lion, they're a band that I don't think a lot of people would give a lot of credit to. But if you like listen to what he's doing on guitar, there's a lot of like theory and chord knowledge and study that goes into like just like the intro of Wait, which is my favorite White Lion song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love White Lion.
Yeah, they're very good. I would say that I still feel like there's some excellent guitar shredding that happens in the metal scene now. I'm not personally a huge fan of the really aggressive like 7 and 8 string guitar, like really like staccato, like da 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 kind of stuff. It's not really my it's not really my thing. But yeah, I'm completely in line with you here. When I think of like killer musicianship, I imagine like I love super shreddy guitar solos, like tons of like, you know, holding the guitar by the whammy bar and like two hand tapping, like all of that stuff. I think
that's what I grew up idolizing.
And so you did guitar and bass at the same time. Could I ask you just for my own personal education, because I'm playing bass in my band now for the first time. What is like a major? Do you remember any like kind of major breakthroughs you had when it came to learning to play bass better? Because I can ride the root note all day, and I know fifths and octaves and stuff, but I'm trying to like not be the cliche bass player who just plays the root note.
So I would be the first person to admit that I downplayed the importance and the sophistication of bass playing forever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, dude, these are bros that just ride on the root note and it's, you know, whatever. But once I had taken some lessons, once I really started to study, because the backstory behind me joining SR-71 is I was friends with those guys, especially Mitch. Mm-hmm. We had written songs together. You know, I kind of looked up to him, and we stayed in touch. And I heard some rumblings about Mark and Jeff leaving, and I called him and I was like, I want to be in your band. I want to be, and I wanted to be the guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, all right, well, look, why don't you learn these songs, but I want you to learn them on bass. And I was like, you know, I'm a guitar player, right? And he's like, yeah, you'll be fine. I said, all right. I learned every single song they had. And I think I auditioned several days later. It was like 2 or 3 days that they gave me. I never came out of my basement because I idolized that band. And if I had any control over it whatsoever, I was going to be the bass player of that band.
Right.
So once I got the gig, they suggested I start taking some bass lessons because I was a guitar player playing bass, and that is very different than a bass player. And I still don't fancy myself a bass player, to be honest with you. But, you know, if you picture like a Kool-Aid, like a glass Kool-Aid jar, when the bass playing is quality and when it's right, it fills up the bottom of that jar. It fills the bottom of the song, of the music. And it's big and it's thick and it's warm and it's full, and it's the glue that holds everything else together. You know, basically the drums are the train. Okay. That's what's keeping you on the track. And the bass is the glue or the coupling mechanisms that are holding all the cars together. And the guitar and the singing they're just dancing on top, you know, melodically. So I think once I learned to really focus on the drums, you can't be a great bass player if you're not locked in the drums. And there's a number of things that the guys in SR-71 did that I wasn't doing at the time with Plunge that I later adapted, you know, into my own bands and used from there on out. SR-71 played to a click track live and at rehearsal.
Oh,
you know
really?
you know what I mean by that?
Yeah. You have like
So
a metronome in your. You have a metronome in your going like.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So there's a tempo that the songs are recorded at. It may or may not be a different tempo in rehearsal, and maybe a different tempo live, and we would adjust that based on how it felt and energy and whatnot. But every single song was played to a click track so that it was perfect. And that was something I learned from SR-71, and then Plunge did it, and then Cinder Road did it, and my solo band did it. And on top of that, in both SR-71 and every band I've had since, we would have rhythm section practices where just the bass player and drummer would rehearse live, so they could get locked in. It's very easy when it's loud and there are 4 or 5 people in the room. Everybody's just kind of listening to themselves, to get lost in just getting through the song. But when you implemented rhythm section practices, it really locked in those 2 guys with each other, so that when they came back with the group, they knew what to hear, they knew what to listen for, and then really it's a feel thing. They knew what felt right. And then, conversely to that, we would have acoustic practices with, everybody, the guitar players and the drummer. My drummers would be on, some type of hand percussion. So we could really hear the vocals, and the melodies. So that's how we would hone things in for the bands I was a part of.
Awesome. That is, yeah, I've never had that. I've never rehearsed that much. I might be bringing that into into the next rehearsal whenever I'm allowed to leave my house again.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you were in, so you joined SR-71 back when you were still Plunged, and you were in those bands simultaneously, if I recall.
Well, yeah, more or less. I mean, I left, Plunge, or we put Plunge on hiatus when I joined. I joined SR-71 in December 2002. And, I brought the guys over to my house after I got the gig and said, look, you're not going to believe this, but I'm going to be the new bass player for SR-71. Plunge isn't over. I still want to do this, but right now I need to focus on SR-71. We had just released a month or 2 beforehand the Tomorrow album, and we were getting ready to gear up on tour and go out and support the record. We went and did some TV shows and some fly gigs, as they call them, and then we went out on the road with Evanescence right when they first came out. And I was hoping that was going to be years of touring, and unfortunately the album didn't take off nearly as well as Now You See I did. And by the spring or summer, I was doing festivals and gigs here and there, but I needed to make a living,
Right.
So I started playing acoustic with Brian from Plunge, Brian McGill, and basically Chris Shikowski and Matt Calvaresi and 2 of our buddies started Hindsight, and they basically took over the calendar that Plunge had booked for the next 6 to 12 months worth of cover gigs. And they started doing their own thing. So I went and did acoustic gigs with Brian because I could book them with less notice, and, it was decent money. And then eventually, SR-71 kind of faded away because Mitch started, doing more and more songwriting sessions. So it didn't leave me a choice. So I kind of brought Plunge back together. We eventually got signed to Columbia Records, and that didn't work out. And then we eventually signed to EMI Records, and we were forced to change the name of the band because Plunge was copyrighted or trademarked by somebody else. So that's when we changed the name to Cinder Road, and we had a couple different members. Brian McGill left the band in December-ish of 2006. So it was me and Chris, and we brought in Matt Dogan on bass and Matt Calvaresi, and we brought Pat Dement in to play guitar, who put me in SR-71 because we wanted 2 guitarists, and I wanted to focus on singing. So it was, kind of a different lineup, or an amended lineup, and we had to change the name. So we just said, let's start singing fresh.
Totally. And then you, and I'll tell you this. I still listen to those Cinder Road records every now and again. Those songs are great. Like I think the first time, the first song I heard, I think that really impressed me was Back Home to You. I really and still love that song. Um,
My favorite song I've ever written.
it's a wonderful, it's a ec- absolutely excellent song. Killer guitar solo. I love the acoustic melodies you do in the verses of that song. It's it's killer, man.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I
And
appreciate that. I mean, that's the one. That's the like. I haven't had a lot of songs like that in my career,
mhm,
but that was one that people talk about. Like you'll hear other artists talk about a hit of theirs
mhm.
and say, when we finished writing the song, we just knew. And that was that song for me. And one of the things that kills me to this day is that song never got the chance to be the hit that I think it could have been.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I would put that. I think that song would beat the shit out of "Lips of an Angel." That's. And I'm trying to
Yeah,
be. I'm trying to be
I agree.
funny. Uh, I hope I'm
No, I
not.
hear you.
I don't mean to. I hope I'm not dredging up like anything that you don't want to talk about. I'm.
No, I mean, look, it is what it is. It's taken years and years for me to kind of move past that, and my identity from the late 90s through 2012 was Mike Rocco, the musician, singer, songwriter, guitarist, bass player, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the guy that was never going to give up. And it's funny how things change when your wife gets pregnant, and I was starting to age in the music world,
Mm-hmm.
being 29, and like, look, I'd been signed to major labels multiple times. I'd been around the world multiple times. I'd put out a bunch of records. I'd all the partying you could possibly do, and did the radio, promo tours and this, that, and the other, and it just wasn't catching on. And it was because of a lot of factors. It was everything. It was timing. It was record labels, songs. It was, maybe some of the songs weren't as good as we thought they were. Who knows? I mean, there's a million factors that went into it, and it just didn't work. And, or at least didn't work, and I don't want people to take that the wrong way, didn't work to the level we wanted to be. I wanted to be Bon Jovi,
Right.
And we were so blessed and fortunate to be we were signed numerous times. We did get out of town, out of Baltimore. We did get signed. We got to do all of those cliche, incredible things. I've done every single thing that I dreamed about doing as a musician, every one of them. And that's why it's easier today to I love having some drinks and being with my old bandmates and telling the stories of all the crazy shit that we used to do back in the day, and remember this and remember that, and one story leads to another, and it was my past, and it was something I'm very proud of, and maybe not every moment, but a lot of them. And
Right.
now I was fortunate and blessed enough to kind of stumble into a new career that's provided me and my family with a great life, and I love what I do now.
That's awesome, man. It's like it's not an it's like you're a Spartan warrior and you managed to come back from the battle. Maybe you've got one eye like in 300, but you've got the stories of the battle, and you can't say you there's no what ifs for you. It sounds like if you say everything you wanted to do, that's and then to be at a great place in your life now, that's amazing, man. That's like
Well, there was a lot of what ifs for a lot of years, I can tell you that. But I've reached the point where I changed. I had to change that, and I you can't live in that place forever,
right.
because it just doesn't work. It's not enjoyable. It's not, so you learn. Is it all right if I make a drink on? We're recording.
Oh yeah.
You just do what you've got to do, and you move on. And thankfully, I had a lot of different things that made it easier to move on. When you've got a young kid,
Mm-hmm.
that's where it's awesome. So hang tight. I know there's background noise. Give me 1 second, and I'll be done.
Okay, no worries.
All right, I'm back.
Oh, sounds good. Yeah, it's just kind of the nature of I've been doing a lot of these under different circumstances. So I've got episodes with like like sirens in the background. Just kind of the nature of the gig right now.
Podcast world. Yeah.
Totally. So
Sure.
I wanted to ask you because you've done you guys did some like like awesome touring with like a lot of huge acts. I'm curious. I would I'm curious what like some of the more memorable tour experiences for you were.
Oh my God, how much time do you have?
I've got as much
Um,
time as you
you
want.
know,
I love this
well,
stuff.
look, I'll give you a few different instances. Look, first of all, when we were a young, hungry, up and coming band that was, we did anything and everything we could. Bands strive for success on different levels depending where they are in their career. So in the beginning, for us, we just wanted to be on tour and wanted to be on tour forever. Because
Mm-hmm.
that's what meant you were getting shit done. You were touring. People other than, the people in your neighborhood wanted to hear what you had to do and say, And so when we started out, we would play cover shows. We were a cover band that always played originals. So we would play those all the way from Rhode Island down to Key West with we would do as many original shows as we can. And then just when we'd run out of money to, pay our bills, we would go and then we'd play a week of cover shows in Key West, or
Mm-hmm.
we'd go play a week at a Holiday Inn in Fredericksburg, Virginia, because it paid us enough money to keep touring for another couple of weeks. So that was the beginning. And then after that, when things started to build, we got involved with the armed forces, and those armed forces entertainment was another great stepping stone for us, where we were hired to go play for the troops. And it wasn't like you might see on the news where, these artists get paid huge dollar amounts to go do concerts for the troops. We were paid a per diem, they call it honorarium. Basically covers your cost of being there. You're not really paid to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way we liked it. I mean, because this is when 9/11 was happening and
Right.
the fallout, and we wanted to do something. And God, they took us everywhere. I mean, we went to Japan, Korea, Guam, Hawaii, all over Europe, Greenland, Italy, Germany, Cuba, like crazy spots. So that was a big stepping stone for us. And that's where I made the decision for Plunge that became Cinder Road, that we were going to become an original band only. We were no longer going to play covers anymore, because Plunge and SR-71 did a tour of Japan together, and Plunge opened, and obviously SR-71 closed.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Plunge played some of our songs and some covers, to get the crowd going.
Yeah.
And I remember it felt so much better when I got on stage with SR-71, because they were just playing their songs, and everyone was stoked to hear their song. And I wanted to feel. And we made the decision when we got home from that tour. I said, look, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to do our songs, and if we're going to make it, we're going to make it. And if we fail, it wasn't meant to be. And thankfully, eventually we got signed, and it worked out. But,
Yeah.
Moving from there, I mean, once we got signed with Cinder Road, that's when a lot of these big dreams of mine really came true. So the first tour we did with Cinder Road, right before the album came out, right after the album was finished, was we did the Daughtry Tour. We toured with them for 5 or 6 months, right when Chris came off of American Idol.
Yeah.
And it was the hottest tour going at the time. And I'm telling you, I shit you not, there was a line around the block to get into the show at 9 o'clock in the morning, police, news, crews, because this dude, was like arguably one of the best on the show, and probably should have won, but he didn't. And that was like a big shock. And this is when everybody and their brother watched American Idol.
Yeah.
So everybody knew this guy. Not only was he known as a musician, he was a TV star. And that was our first foray into that. And man, those fans were rabid. It was incredible. It was like no music stand you'd ever seen. because not only were they into the music, but you were a celebrity to them.
Right.
And just because we were in the room, because we were on the tour, they looked at us similarly. So within days of being on that tour, they all had our records. They sang every word. They knew all of our names. They would follow us places. They'd bring, trunkfuls of gifts to our bus, and it could be food or liquor, baked goods, whatever, like crazy stuff. So we toured the entire country with Daughtry for 6 months, played all of those historic and awesome venues that you talked about, and many others. And it was unbelievable, because he was just, we were hanging on the back of his rocket ship for dear life, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And then from there, obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention when we got the Kiss tour, because obviously that was the single biggest moment in our music career. I remember when we got the tour, I cried. I was so happy.
Yeah, I imagine as someone who grew up on 80s metal, opening for Kiss has got to be like the dream.
It was. And not only was it opening for Kiss, it was opening for Kiss in stadiums and arenas.
Yeah.
Like we played in stadiums, 50 or 100,000 people there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the top. The top is when it's your own show. But I mean, we got to taste it. We were part of it. We were there. And man, I mean, there's so many little stories, but I remember we played in Moscow at the Olympic Stadium with Kiss. And, it was this crazy trip to get into Moscow, and we had to take an overnight train from Riga, Latvia, through Belarus to Moscow. And when we woke up in the morning, we got to Moscow, and there was a translator and a driver there to pick us up. And that was cool. We felt super cool that we had that. And mind you, like a lot of European countries, you can get around. Italy, Germany, places like that, you can kind of feel your way around, especially if you took any kind of foreign language in high school.
Right.
You kind of get the gist, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Russia, Korea, places like that, you don't have a prayer.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the population doesn't speak English, and the signs look like a tic-tac-toe board. But we got over there. This was the biggest building I have ever stepped foot in my life. And it was just unbelievable. And here we were, like, growing up as a kid that grew up in the 80s, in the Cold War, Yeah. We're in freaking Moscow, and we're playing the stadium where they had the Olympics. It was crazy. It was unbelievable. We played a Coliseum in Verona, Italy, where gladiators fought lions. I mean, no joke. I mean, they literally, had those types of things back in, God knows how many hundreds of years ago. And it was just unbelievable. I mean, you couldn't create that. We don't have that history here in the United States.
No,
it's a different history. We have great history, but it's just different.
No, yeah, totally. Because most of like the old, there are surviving like historical theaters, but like when you think of like a lot of it has been torn down or it's fallen into disrepair. Yeah, that sounds incredible. Like it would be the equivalent for me of getting to play the Globe Theater, like in London, like if to stand on
right.
that stage. That's amazing, dude. How do you adapt to performing in front of a stadium of 50,000 people? Because it's got I imagine it's a different vibe than like in front of like 500 to 700.
It is. It's actually harder, I think, to connect with them because you're so far away, and mind you, we were the opening band, so they really didn't know us, so you've got the barricade that's got you 10 feet away from the people anyways, and then you can only see X amount of feet in front of the 50 feet, whatever it is, because the lights are kind of shining down at you, so it's hard to see them. But in order to, at least in my experience, try to make it in that industry, you gotta believe that you belong, and that's what we did every day. walk the walk, talk the talk, and then eventually, hopefully, you become, part of the party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. How is playing in Japan for you? I always like to ask that because I love that country. I've been a couple times, and I did stand up there in a British pub after like a 14-hour flight. So I'm always curious I'm
Yeah,
curious what your experience was in that country, because that and Thailand are two places where I was like, yeah, I can't even attempt to squeak by. I have no basis for this
it was
language.
my favorite. Japan was my favorite country that we visited. It was the one that embraced us the most. I've been there 8 times. I loved it. I remember when we went there some time ago that we got there were people waiting at the airport for us, like fans with CDs, like, and that just blew me away. It was like our little mini moment of feeling like the Beatles.
Cool.
Um, it was incredible. It was incredible, and I did a press tour by myself before I went over there alone. And did a press tour before the Cinder Road album came out over there. I did TV shows and all kinds of different stuff, and magazine interviews and photo shoots. And man, I mean, I felt like I was 6. I thought it was amazing.
Did you do any of like the super crazy, like confusing talk shows?
No, I mean, we did one thing where like I was making origami, like, art with somebody on TV, and
Mm-hmm.
different interviews where, there was a translator. So like I would be looking at the person that was talking to me, not understanding a word they said, and then look to the person next to me who would translate it to me. And then I'd look back and talk to the person that asked me the question. And then I'd look over at the translator as they said what I said back to the person that asked me the question, but stuff like that. But, we didn't do any like Wipeout style, kind
Right,
of
right.
crazy game shows or anything.
I always get the couple of times I always get a kick out of watching those where it's like I have no idea what's going on, but I'm just really enjoying everything I'm seeing. Um, that's
Yep.
that's killer, man. So you do all these tours. This the second Cinder Road record is out at a certain point, and what's like the slowdown like? Because how long did you tour as Cinder Road?
I guess it would have been '07 through 2011. And then in 2012 is when 11 into 12 is when I started doing my solo record, and 2012 is when I toured on my solo record, The Ride, The Rise, The Risk with Daughtry.
Mm-hmm.
But how's what? I mean, look, so at one point, I can't remember, maybe around 2010 plus or minus, I eventually got signed as a staff songwriter for Bug Music, which was part of BMG. And, I was writing with all kinds of people. I wrote with Duff McKagan and Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses. I wrote with Janie Lane, who unfortunately passed away, who was the singer of Warrant.
Yes.
I wrote with, a lot of writers that most people wouldn't know their names, but wrote big hits for Aerosmith and for Lisa Marie Presley and for, you name it. Mariah Carey. All kinds of people that I wrote songs with. And then I was pitching songs to different people. So Candlebox did some of my songs. That's because I wrote those with Kevin Martin. The Gracious Few, which was Candlebox, Kevin Martin from Candlebox singing with the band live behind him. I wrote some songs on their record. I had Hailstorm cut one of my songs. Unfortunately, it didn't make the record, but lots of stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that you were a staff songwriter. That's really interesting to me as well. Just like the trying to figure out like the craft of how you write a song. And I imagine working with
Well,
so many different artists across different genres is
it's super difficult. But if you're a guy that gets along with pretty much anybody, which I like to think that I am, it's the natural next step. If you're a decent songwriter and your band hasn't blown up and become huge, you start writing with and for other people to try to make a living, and maybe you get a hit for yourself, maybe you get a hit for somebody else, but it's all about staying in the business.
mm-hmm.
And I did as best I could with that, and had some good things and, some not so good things, but eventually, and that's when, after I did my solo record tour in 2012, I got the call, or not the call, I was at home and my wife took the test, and, that line or the 2 lines of a circle or whatever it is showed up, and she was pregnant, and something clicked in my brain. And I can't do this anymore. I knew I wasn't going to be a good dad, and I wasn't going to be a good husband if I continued to try to chase this dream of being a touring rock and roll guy, because, there's a lot of unhealthy things that go with it, on top of the fact that you're just away. And I didn't want to be away for all those things. And I used that as the catalyst to dive into a new career. And it took years of me missing it. And I still miss it. And I still have moments where I'm like, damn, we were so close, shoulda, woulda, coulda, but realistically, most of the time it's all good.
I'm glad to hear that, man. And I'm glad that it's mostly good, because I feel like there's an alternate path where that's much darker, and I'm glad you're not on that. I wanted to ask you, because I was able to find like the Cinder Road and the Plunge stuff. I'm curious, is your solo record anywhere that I can get it?
Yeah, it's on iTunes.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I listen to that. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that you've been so like. I appreciate your time, first of all, because a lot of times I just feel like I kind of feel like a starstruck fan who's just trying to talk to people who has meant something to him. Because I've interviewed like hundreds of my comedian friends, and coronavirus, oddly enough, has kind of created the circumstances over which I can reach out to people that I knew from Baltimore, and you're one of those people, Mike.
Right.
So I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to talk. And I look, I got to help put my kids to bed, but I'd be more than happy if you'd have me to come on again, and we can dive into some more stories.
I would absolutely love to do that. I will email you tomorrow, and we can set that up.
Perfect. Well, hey, great talking to you. Thanks for thinking of me, and stay safe and healthy out there.
I absolutely will, Mike, and you as well. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
You got to take care.
You too. Bye. All right, folks, that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. This interview I've had in the chamber, so to speak, for a few months now. This was recorded a little while back, and I guess the reason is that I don't know if I was maybe bringing up things that maybe Mike didn't want to talk about anymore. I don't know. But I would love to hear how you guys feel about this. If anything, I definitely remember the great times I had seeing his band play, and some of the stories he's told me. He has lived the kind of experiences that if you are a aspiring creative person, I think all of us would like to. So as he said, you can get his most recent solo album on iTunes, and you can also find Cinder Road wherever you get your music. I will link to their albums in the description, because I do think they were a spectacular hard rock band with some amazing songs. So I definitely think if you haven't heard of Cinder Road, you should check them out. I want to thank you guys for being here. If you listen to this and think you know a friend who might find this podcast interesting, we are available on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can get a free month of Stitcher Premium if you sign up with the promo code AWESOME. And that's a way to support the show. And I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level, Mary Beth Mooney. Thank you so much for your support. I sincerely appreciate it. And if you guys are curious what I'm doing over on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster and check out some of the exclusive things that I do over there. But this show, as long as I can do it, I want this show to be free, because having these conversations is been very rewarding for me. And I hope if you're a listener there that you have found this interesting, entertaining, and I hope wherever you are that you're doing well. So I thank you guys for being here during this time for me as well, because this is, again, as I've said it before, my window to the world during these truly bizarre, stressful times. So thank you guys for being here, and I will see you next time between awesome and disaster. Stay safe, everybody.